Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Welcome everyone to the LinkedUp podcast. Jamie and I are coming to you from Washington, D.C., and our guest is coming to us from England. You know, Jamie, I love when we have an international podcast because just the thought that we can talk in real time with people all over the world just warms my heart. I love that idea. But you have been telling me about today's guest for a week. You have talked about our guest for a week solid and said you're just not going to believe it, Jerry. So please introduce our guest. Will you please?
Yeah. You know, it's so funny because you know that my Instagram content is all about gardening because my husband built me a big garden bed, but the algo has me pinned as an AI junkie on LinkedIn. And one of my top followers is our guest today, Darren Coxon. What I think I'm drawn to Darren about is the fact that he's very innovative. Like, we know that AI is bringing efficiency to teachers, right? We know that. We know that it's going to bring personalization for the classroom. But some of the innovation and the fun that we need in education is what really Darren, I think he plays and experiments with. But Darren, welcome to our podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Now, you are coming from England, and then tell us about your background.
Yes, I mean, I'm an educator. This is actually my 25th year in teaching. I started teaching in 1998. English and theory of knowledge and film and media. So the sort of that side of teaching. The last 10 years, most of my sort of management career has actually been managing groups of school. So I've been working internationally as a director of education, chief operating officer, basically, managing the operation of schools. And it was actually when I was in Tunisia last year, a year and a half ago, I was running a school in Tunisia. It was the same time that ChatGPT came out. And we went, I think we were probably one of the first schools in the world to go just all in with AI. I could kind of get away with it for several reasons. First of all, I'd gone in to turn the school around because it had been struggling a bit. It didn't have a very good COVID, and it was nothing to do with the management team themselves. It just needed a bit of a lift. And so I had the kind of license to be able to be quite innovative. And so I trained up the staff. All the students were using it. We even trained up the parents so they could understand how to use it themselves, which was actually quite powerful. And we collapsed the curriculum. We did project-based learning. We did work on sustainable development goals. The students were running with passion project. And I think, you know, what you're talking earlier on, that we were talking about sort of this notion of joy and bringing back joy into school. I really noticed that it changed the atmosphere in the school hugely because it shifted the relationship between the students and the teachers, and everyone was learning together. We really felt like, you know, we were all in it together because quite frankly, none of us had a clue what we were doing. It was all so new. So we just learned together and we made mistakes together. And that was actually a really joyful experience. And then I basically left that role. And for the last sort of 6, 8, 12, 10 months, I've been basically working with schools all over the world, just trying to help them make sense of AI strategically in terms of what happens in the classroom. And just trying to be quite innovative and just mix things up a bit.
So I have a question for you. How did you know to jump in with both feet and jump into the deep end when so many school administrators are reluctant or hesitant? What was it that made you jump in?
Well, one of the first reasons, probably shouldn't say this, but one of the first reasons was I was in a school in North Africa, and actually the regulations were much looser. So I was kind of able to do more and take more risks. Very calculated. I mean, we had all the permissions from the parents. It wasn't like we were experimenting on the children without their parents knowing. I mean, we did, but there was no COPPA, there's no GDPR. You know, we could definitely do more. And also, it was so early with AI that actually a lot of the regulations that have actually come in later when people start to think maybe we need to be a little bit more careful about how we use AI because of hallucinations and bias and what have you, all the kind of all the stuff that we know about, which we don't need to talk too
Right.
much because everyone goes on about it, but we know it's there. So I think I was able to be a bit more innovative anyway, but also I've worked with technology a lot in my career. So I was one of the first, I led one of the first schools to adopt iPads back in 2011, and I did quite a lot of work with Apple on the back of it. So I've kind of always known that when I see something that looks disruptive,
Mm.
and the other thing is I'm the personality type. When I see something which kind of makes me feel nervous, I'm thinking this is potentially very disruptive. I just want to go right down the rabbit hole and learn everything that I possibly can. That's just my personality type. So I think it was a
Love it.
combination of slightly relaxed regulatory environment, a very on-board teaching and and parent body. They were all up for it. And then also just my personality type, just perfect combination, I suppose.
Yeah. Early adopter. I love that.
Very
Yeah.
much so, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. I love that because it is so important for teachers. You're a great model for teachers, for students. We have to take risks, and that's really the way that we learn. And
Yeah.
so, again, calculated risk, right? We want to make sure that we're safe. We have all of those concerns are really important
Yeah.
with respect to data privacy and bias and all of those things. But we know this is not going anywhere. We
No.
know that this is going to be part of our lives. And I always say we have to learn how to coexist as
Yeah.
humans and as, and in AI. We have to learn how to leverage it in the best way, and the safest way. So, but it's only going to take actually using it to do so. So,
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
right. Yeah. And I think, and you mentioned earlier too, I think really the starting point is AI literacy. I've seen several school districts kind of either let AI happen or introduce it, but then shut it down because
Mhm.
the students are using it inappropriately. But they're
Yeah.
using it inappropriately because they weren't taught the proper way to use it. And although we know, kids, or we call them digital natives, or there are still certain guidelines that we all must be aware of, and some current information that we have to take into consideration before using this. And I think that AI literacy really is, and not just for students. I think I have to start with admin and teachers, and then to probably roll it out to students so that we're all, like you mentioned before, you had your teachers and students learning it together, and we're still going to be doing that. We can never get ahead of it. We can only have a slow jog behind, but we have to have that foundation of AI literacy. So how do you go about making sure that
Yeah.
happens?
Yeah, I think, well, look, first thing to say, and let's the big elephant in the room, I suppose, when it comes to AI use, is that the reason a lot of students are using it to cheat because they see absolutely no value in the work that's being given to them to do.
Exactly.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
they if honestly, I often can't blame them. So
Right.
and that may be an unpopular or a slightly controversial thing to say, but I think a lot of us in education recognize the fact that we're essentially asking a lot of our students to do fairly worthless, busy work,
Yeah.
quite lower order busy work, and therefore, is there any wonder why they're using ChatGPT to write their essays for them? Because there's just, they see
They're
very
bored.
little point in, and they're very, very bored. And, even if you just look at the last 15 years since you had I'm just talking about the US system. I mean, the UK system's not much better, but in the last 15 years since you had the introduction of Common Core, actually, you're testing your students so much,
Yeah.
so regularly. It's impacting on their mental health. They're
Yes.
so super stressed. And there's any wonder if they find a way to leverage AI to save them some time and some mental stress, is there any wonder why they're doing it? So I don't actually honestly don't blame a lot of
Yeah.
students for using AI. And if they can get away with it, good for them in some respects. I mean, obviously it's not helping them learn, but you know what? If it's saving them time, then sometimes I really can't blame them. So I think the reason why this is kind of quite critical and why this linked to AI literacy is if we're not giving them models for good AI use, they're going to use AI in ways that kind of are the easiest for them to use and the kind of the shortest cuts for them to use. So I think that's one thing to say. When it comes to actually what to teach students when it comes to AI literacy, I mean, broadly speaking, it's things like, how does it work? I think this is actually really important. And if you look at China and if you look at Hong Kong and Singapore, they're all teaching their students what is a large language model? What is a transformer model? How does text to image work? What is the actual process that you go through in the background? Because actually it's really important. You need to understand how a transformer model, like, ChatGPT, generative pre-trained transformer, the T stands for transformer. Kids need to know what that means. Because actually, when you understand what a transformer is, it then means that you can understand how to make the most from it, because it's basically a prediction machine based on its training data. And it's always going to predict broadly the most obvious solution, the most obvious response. How can you unlock the power of a transformer model by doing things like creative prompting? How can you almost like unblock its predictive formulaic response into giving you something which is quite unusual and quite quirky and just different. So I think if you can start to teach students the basics of how AI works, it can actually help them unlock how to use AI better. And then things like AI ethics. We talk so much about bias, it becomes quite actually a little bit tiresome sometimes, because we know it's there, we need to teach it. But why is it biased? Not just the fact it's biased, no, isn't it, terrible that it's biased, but why?
Right.
What is it about a transformer model or a diffusion model or whatever model it is you're talking about? Why is it? Well, it's biased because it's trained on our data. It's a mirror on who we are. It's synthesizing our own biases. So, it's not, I posted a while back, I said AI isn't biased. I got quite a lot of hate back. My argument was AI itself is just it's an algorithmic process. It's an algorithmic kind of mechanism, but it's the way in which it's been trained on our data and then further trained by our biases that creates the end product, which is the bias. So I think you need to be teaching students. And then the third thing, I guess, with AI literacy is, how can you stay safe?
Yes.
And this is where the teachers come in and the parents come in, because, I'm already hearing of criminal gangs that are using images of students from a school to create deepfake videos to then bribe and blackmail schools and blackmail families. So how do you keep your data safe? How do you keep your images safe? How do you act online to make sure you're giving the least opportunity to criminal gangs to actually use your data for criminal purposes? So I think if we're broadly focusing on that, what I haven't talked about in that, prompt engineering, because that's just not going to be a thing for much longer.
Right. I get
actually
about that. I was thinking about that recently. Yeah.
Yeah,
you're gonna get it. Yeah.
You don't need. I mean, the actual term prompt engineering predates ChatGPT. So it was the very early models, the very early AI models, where you had to be quite mechanical and quite almost scientific and mathematical about how you prompted them. Now you can just have a chat to them.
Right.
You can just literally say, you can even begin a prompt chain to say, I kind of want to do this. What's the best way to do it? And the AI will say, we should do this, 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 and this. And then you just follow the instruction. So you don't even need to have a very detailed way of prompting AI, because you can just, what I do is I use one AI to create the prompt that I feed into another AI. It's like, I want to do this. Can you write me the prompt? And it writes the prompt, and then I just put it into and that works really, really well.
That's a great idea.
I use Claude, so Claude is a great prompt writer. So I will literally say, this is what I want to do. Can you write me the prompt to instruct a large language model to complete that task? And the unlock word there is instruct. So this is what I want to achieve at the end. I need you to write the instructions to achieve that. And it does an unbelievably good job. So prompt engineering is just not a thing anymore. So you don't really need to teach it to students, but you need to teach them how it works, and then how to keep themselves safe online. And then, when it goes wrong, why does it go wrong?
Am I on the right track when I think this is kind of like the SAMR model was with that we're kind of in the substitution with AI? Oh, it'll write me a letter. It'll write me a lesson plan.
Yeah.
But we need to move on up to redefinition.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the SAMR model never really, it wasn't actually a thing with iPad. I mean, it kind of was talked about, and I know Rupert Fundadera's, I understand his approach, and it kind of, it quite neat, but actually the iPad could never redefine. And the reason is, essentially all you're really doing with an iPad is you're taking a shiny rectangle that was on the wall, and you're putting the shiny rectangle in the hands of the student. That's actually it. You're not redefining anything. You're just stopping them looking at an interactive whiteboard, and they're looking at a screen instead. And yes, okay, they could take a video and they could edit it, but it's not redefining anything. The difference with AI, and I think the reason that AI is already potentially moving us towards redefinition, because it puts the power in the hands of the student. It removes the locus of control from the teacher to the students will more and more be able to craft their own learning pathways, and they'll be able to have their own learning interactions with AI. That's redefinition if you want to look at the kind of the model. But I think at the moment in most schools, we're definitely at the yes, possibly the augmentation, because, for example, you can use AI to do things that we can't do, but it's broadly the same. But most of the work being done now with teachers is they're creating a lesson plan, they're creating resources, the augmentation may be they can create 5 different sets of differentiated resources that they couldn't do before, but they're still creating resources. So, but you're right. I actually think the SAMR model fit AI better than it fitted the iPad.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And what do you see redefinition look like? What does it look like?
I think redefinition, right? So if you take at the one end, at the S end, the teacher creates a pack of revision materials for the students for their exam. That's the S. The redefinition end is the student is able to interact in real time with the AI to give them exactly the materials they need at the precise moment they need them. And not only that, as the student comes up with they get the resource, they get the material, they're then able to go back to the AI at whatever precise moment to then get them to explain the concept, maybe to explain it more simply, maybe to, take them in a different direction. And then also the ability to do all of that in real time with a conversation. So a really good example of that is, I don't know whether you saw the Google I/O conference last week.
No.
If you haven't, worth watching. So, and even just watch, I think there's an 18-minute highlight reel on YouTube, which just takes the main points. But it's because it's about a 2-hour conference, but it's worth watching just because actually it shows the future.
It was the day after. Sorry, it was the day after the OpenAI announcement, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the cynic in the cynic in me thinks, well, do you know what? The reason that OpenAI rushed there was because the I/O conference has been in the calendar for a long time. Google always OpenAI always like to try and get in there just the day before, because that's not the first time they've done it.
Yeah.
But there was one, I posted on this actually, there was one particular feature that Google released, or they haven't released it yet, but they're going to release it quite soon. They have one particular AI called Notebook LM. And it's available now in the US. I mean, I need to access it through a VPN, but you can access it in the US. And basically what it does is it enables you to train a digital notebook on all of your materials. So you drop in your PDFs and you drop in your worksheets and whatever it is, you drop it all in.
Yes.
And then you can have conversations with all of that learning material. That's substitution, probably augmentation actually, because actually you're able to have conversations which you couldn't do normally. It's probably augmentation, maybe modification actually, but it certainly sits at that end. The redefinition comes when you will have two AI voice agents who are giving in real-time discussion seminar on that material that you can then join in with.
Yeah.
Wow.
That for me is the definition of a redefined learning experience,
Right.
because you're literally involved in a three-way conversation, two AI voices in real time that's trained on all of the data that you've uploaded into your notebook. So that to me is where we will very soon move. And that's when we start to redefine. And of course, as soon as we properly redefine what happens to the role of the teacher,
Yes.
because actually you've moved into a very different space, if you like.
Yeah. I was just going to ask about that because we're at a place right now where many teachers have not used AI at all. Many have explored a little bit and are just using it for the efficiency piece
Yeah,
because some schools are not allowing it with students yet.
yeah,
Because and I get that because I remember even I think it was your post, and it really I think it gave grace to schools because we call this an AI revolution, and you said, well, this is really an evolution,
yeah,
and we do. It's okay to take your time. There's
yeah,
no rush, but at the same time, it dawned on me when I watched that Google announcement because it's going to be very soon. This is a tidal wave.
yeah,
We have to keep this where we can never get ahead. It's this slow pace we can try to keep behind, but at very well next year, we're going to be in a place where students can have personalized learning is going to come to life. We've been
yeah,
talking about it for years. It's very hard to do. And I'm going to blame testing for the reason that it hasn't taken off the way that it should. It's so hard for teachers to do with fidelity because of the restrictions we have with pacing
yeah,
guides and all of those sorts of things. But we're going to have this. We're going to have this. And so I'm thinking of the teacher and I'm thinking of how the classroom can be changed into, and this is where this coexisting comes into play. Well, teachers try to conference with kids now, and they can only get through 5 conferences a day. And then sometimes they don't get to meet with students until the end of the week. Well,
yeah,
here, while they can still, now it's not so detrimental because they can still have that schedule of 5 students per week, but they know that the students are getting these quality touch points with
yeah,
their AI co
yeah.
tutors.
Co-pilot, mentor,
Yeah.
whatever, buddy, study
Yeah.
buddy, whatever you want to call it. No, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. I think it's definitely going to shift. So look, the reason, not just my opinion, many people's opinions, the reason why I think we're very nervous about moving away from the testing culture is because it actually gives us a framework within which to kind of hold children. It's a boundary within which to hold children. And actually, most schools and educators are going to be quite terrified of moving away from that because it's essentially a control mechanism. You've got to do this because we're going to be tested on it. You've got to get, it's going to get you through the exam. This is what you need to focus on. The number of lessons I've observed and teachers I've trained and schools I've worked with where I'm hearing, so why are we doing this? Well, because it's on the exam paper.
Yes.
That's it. So it's like, it's a set of guardrails which tightly define the interactions you're going to have in your classroom with the student. Okay, so you remove that. Well, where's the control mechanism? And so I think the challenge that we've got right now is if we remove testing, what do we put in its place? How do we know?
World experiences. We put these experience, just like you were talking about before, the SDGs. We put, real world connections, solving
Absolutely.
problems we're having in the real
Exactly.
world. And it brings that joy back. It brings true engagement back.
Yeah.
I believe that it's going to help with absenteeism and dropout rates because we're going to have this space now where we can really make sense what John Dewey's been talking about, had been talking about in the last century, so
Yeah.
2 centuries ago, and we can really just connect to the world in that way and bring the world into the classroom and make things meaningful for students. Give them purpose. Give them purpose.
I mean, in theory, absolutely agree with you. I mean, I couldn't agree more with you. I think the practicalities of realizing that are going to be very difficult, because I'm not sure we have the strength and depth within the teaching profession and the courage within the teaching
Yes.
profession to do that. I think the problem that we've got is we've got a lot of very timid people, not because of their personality, or maybe because of their personality type, but more likely just because they've been beaten down by the system, and
Yes.
they've been cowed by the system
Yes.
to the point where they're scared to actually put their head above the parapet
Right.
in case they're going to get sniped. So I think there's a challenge. This is why the evolution piece for me makes more sense, because if you just look at history, evolution is always beaten revolution. Okay.
Mhm.
Revolution, you have these sudden shifts, but actually often it can go back to the status quo in time. Often you might get a revolution and then actually things tail off. Evolution is a slow and gradual process of what is essentially the survival of the fittest. And so I think that actually, when it's applied to education, I'd probably rather see some sudden spikes. You might get a sudden change, but actually what you're going to see is a gradual shifting away from chalk and talk and away from teaching to the test towards more experiential learning, more project-based learning, more work on sort of solving meaty real-world problems. But I think actually my prediction now is that we might see a slow evolution in schools, but we may see a revolution in learning and potentially individualized learning at home, or personalized learning, where students might suddenly realize they can get everything they need from a conversation with their AI that's going to teach them everything they need to pass their test. And that schools themselves will naturally have to change, because actually the students are going to be like, I don't need to listen to you.
Right.
I mean, literally, you bore me. The teacher I've got in the class, that it reminds me of a bit like that wonderful scene from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And I often quote this scene when I talk to people about education. There's that scene in Ferris Bueller's Day Off with the economics teacher, and he talked at the class, and the camera pans and to the reactions of the students, and it's just hatred. It's boredom and it's hatred of the teacher.
I use that in workshops. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great clip. Anyone,
Right.
that awful Bueller, that awful clip. But it's actually very funny, but it's also very, very sad.
Yeah.
We know that there are teachers all over the world who are like that, who just talk at students. Until now, there's been no alternative. And students haven't had an alternative. It's like they've got to suck it up. But actually, even just from last week, okay, so there was some criticism of the voice sounding like Samantha from Her, Scarlett Johansson's voice from Her. But I'm sorry, I listened to that and I thought it was hilariously funny and quirky and charming. And I'm just thinking, if I'm a 14 or a 15-year-old teenage boy, and I'm listening to anyone, or I'm listening to Samantha from Her teaching me trigonometry, I know which I prefer.
Right.
So let's not kid ourselves that just because we're human beings that we're going to be more engaging from AI, because I just don't agree that's the case at all. So I think we are definitely at a tipping point where we're going to start to see lots of children, lots of young people thinking, do you know what? I'm learning masses from this AI. So why am I bothering to listen to this teacher?
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see some problems. I genuinely think in the next few years, we're going to start to see schools get worse places before they start to get better.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that there's a way in there for we had to have the best of both worlds, and to really, have that human connection in the classroom,
Definitely.
whether it's student to student, teacher to student, teacher to individual student, groups of student, whole class. At the same time, have the content coming from AI. And now, what do we do with it? Now, what can we together do with this? And it's exciting to me. And again, I'm going to say it. When teaching in the 90s, when I was teaching in the early 90s, we did these things. We did projects with Uganda and Australia, and We went out, we made, cases to zoning board to change wetlands, I taught science. And I think those are the sorts of things that, and this was, again, was before the high stakes test. So yes, yeah, I had to do lesson plans and I had, different standards I had to meet, but we also had the trust of the administration to
Yeah.
do all of these innovative types of things. We had interdisciplinary teaming. We worked together as a team.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back. I want to go back to that. And I see some posts saying, oh, now that we have AI, we can't go back and teach like it was the 90s. No, actually, I think that's what we should be doing because those are the sorts of things we were actually doing. And I'm hoping, that's my hope. That's my hope that we can bring back because AI is going to lift some of that, just what you were talking about, some of we can get the content elsewhere and now let's do something with it. So,
but even the
I feel like it's time to do time or the skill.
Even the content itself. I mean, so much of the content is just tired and irrelevant and just utterly pointless. I mean, we cram our kids minds full of things that actually crowd their brain to the point where they're not thinking about the big thought. They need to be able to think big thoughts because we've got big problems to solve, and we're not giving them the space to do that. So I think we need to change. And we need to create. Basically, we need to create space in our schools for children to kind of create their own pathways in that space. Yeah. But the danger and the fear is that if we do that, how are they going to fill that space? Are they going to fill that space with bad behavior? Because let's face it, the biggest fear that any teacher has is that they lose their class and their class is naughty and badly behaved. It's very primal. Based on that,
engagement is the best form of classroom management, always. And I think, but teachers don't always realize that, right?
Darren, before we ran out of time, we have to get to the creative things you've been doing, like the scavenger hunt. I want to hear it all.
Yeah, so
create your own adventure, right? Create your own adventure.
Yeah, there's loads of mad, crazy stuff. So I think I've got a bit of a name for myself as someone who just put loads of crazy ideas. I just had an idea and think, I wonder if this worked, and it does. So I just shared it.
Cool.
So look, I mean, the reason I do this is because it goes back to the way that these large language models work, and that if you can unlock them, and if you unlock them, you can get an awful lot from them. So a few examples. So you can prompt an AI to give you a walking tour of a scene from a novel or a moment in history. So there's one that I share with people where, you can freeze a moment from a book where maybe something's about to happen or maybe something has just happened, and you can enter that scene and the AI can kind of be a tour guide and can walk around that scene. So I don't know, an example might be in George Orwell's Animal Farm, where before Farmer Jones, who's the farmer the farmer who runs the farm, is kicked out of the farm by the animals, and the animals take over. You can actually enter the scene and walk around with the AI, and you can meet the Farmer Jones, and you can meet the horse, and you can meet the pig, and you can talk to them. But the way the AI is set up is such that actually it will give you insight about the characters and the themes. So it's not just wandering around creatively and chatting. It's actually teaching you stuff about the book. Yeah. And another one that I did, and I did this with my daughter, my 17-year-old daughter, who is actually not that keen on AI. And this the other thing to say is lots of kids don't like it. They find it quite boring. And we bang on about it. Yeah, we evangelize about it, but actually they're like, I don't really need it because I'm fine without it, so I'd rather not use it. My daughter's one of those, but she's reading English A level, so advanced English, which is great. So I'm very happy that she's doing that. And she's doing a book by Virginia Woolf, famous British early 20th century writer. So actually what I did is I got my daughter having a conversation, a 3-way conversation with the writer and the character from the book. So it was like, and what was really interesting is that at one point, the writer and the characters just started having a conversation with each other. My daughter was
How does that work?
So you set up it's quite a long prompt where you basically set the behavior of the AI to
Okay.
take two roles, and you'll say
Okay.
something like, if Virginia Woolf says something, Clarissa Dalloway, the character, you can respond. So you're setting up a behavior to have a three-way conversation between the writer, the character, and the student. So what's happening is you're pushing the AI out of its kind of predictive behavior, and as a result, it's giving you insight that it wouldn't give you if you just said, "Tell me what the themes of the novel are." It's going actually almost behind the curtain, behind the scenes, and just giving you that little bit more originality, I suppose. So, tour of the body, you've done the same thing where we do a walking tour of the human body, where they can go through a vein and they can go into explore inside the human body, like they're shrunk down to miniature size, and they can wander around the human body and learn about the human body from the inside. And loads of kind of, when you start thinking outside the box, you infinite the number of things that you can do.
Yeah. So what tools do you think are best to do this sort of thing? You had mentioned Pi to me, and I actually on a long ride with my mom. I love that because you can kind of do a call with them. And I was just to Jerry, and so my mother was having, can't remember which former U.S. president, but my 78-year-old mom, I was showing her this. So on the car ride home, she was having dialogue with a former president in Pi.
Yeah.
And so she just, because she used to teach also, and she just thought it was fabulous. So what is Pi? One of the things you use? What else do you love?
Yes, I mean, Pi's great. Pi's great for kind of bashing around ideas, like having a very ad hoc call. So, for example, I mean, I've got an eight-year-old boy who's fascinated by science, just adores science, and he's really interested in molecular structure and atomic structure, and it's kind of that age. And he can just have a conversation with Pi about whatever he wants to talk about, and it would just have that very natural conversation. But when it comes to these sorts of very creative prompts, I tend to use Claude to kind of go backwards and forwards to create the master prompt. So I'll say, I want to do this. I want to create this kind of this walking tour of, a moment from history or a book or what have you. And it will kind of give me ideas. And then I'll put it into another AI and it won't quite right. Then I'll go back to Claude and I'll say, this didn't work. Can you change it? So I might do that 5 or 6 times where I get that optimal prompt. And then once that prompt's locked in, I actually find Claude very good to run the prompt, or I actually find Google Gemini is very good, quite creative. So I tend not to use ChatGPT that much. I actually find it's not very good for these interactive exercises, mainly because it's trained to be so helpful that it just wants to answer every question.
Oh,
It's like it goes backwards and forwards and it takes both roles. It's like, no, I just want you to pose me a question. Don't answer the question. So I think Claude and Gemini almost tag teaming for these particular creative exercises. I find that the best team.
Oh, I like that, because so many people think when we're talking about AI, we're just talking about ChatGPT.
Hardly ever use it. I hardly ever use it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I like that you're expanding our idea of what it is. Yes. Yes. So what do you, after your year of being immersed in AI in a school, what is it that we need to really take into consideration as we move into the next school year?
Yeah. I think teachers have to slightly change the thinking about their role. If you're going to do this properly, stop being the one who feels like they're in charge, because you're not. And you don't need to be. I mean, you really, really don't need to be. If you look at all of the models pre-industrial revolution, you had kind of community learning where different people had different skills. You didn't have one person who was just the specialist and who was standing at the front talking to, you just didn't have that. So I think we need to kind of go back to that model where we're actually collectively sharing ideas and we're learning and we're growing together. And actually, when I did this piece of work in Tunisia, when we were kind of doing these kind of collapsed curriculum days and weeks and project-based learning, if I went into a classroom and I saw a teacher standing at the front, I wouldn't in front of the class embarrass them, but I would actually take them to one side later, say, just don't do that.
Yeah.
Because actually that's not what this is about. I want to see students at the front and you sitting listening to the students.
yes.
The change I'm not kidding you. It was absolutely remarkable. I would be walking into classrooms and there was so much energy and there was so much happiness. Everyone, and the teachers were so enjoyed becoming kind of part of a collective learning experience rather than them feeling they had to have the control. And I had older students teaching younger students and younger students leading older. It was really fascinating to see. So I would say that if there's one thing that needs to change, it would be, let's just see teachers slightly shift in their mindset. And the second thing, school leaders, principals,
Yes.
have to drive this forward.
Yes.
It can't be, this is not a grassroots movement, because all we get is we get isolated pockets of teachers using it kind of maybe slightly, a bit guiltily.
Yeah, as if they're going rogue, right?
Yeah.
And it needs to be that support from administration and guidance. Yeah. So guide on the side, no more sage on the stage. And, giving some teachers credit, and most teachers are already doing that. But you're right, Darren, there are many who still, it's their comfort zone. And they're going to survive in this AI world that we have now. It's got to be student-centered.
It's not, look, go back to the evolution piece. It's not like you have to throw everything out tomorrow. You don't. All you do is think about, okay, Friday afternoons. They're just wasted in school. Just give Friday afternoons over to project-based learning. Just change your timetable so that every Friday afternoon, kids are running with passion projects. They can choose what they want to learn, because they can learn so much about AI and how to use these tools if they're applying it to things that they're inherently interested in. So literally just say, our Friday afternoons are going to be, passion projects, project-based learning, solving SDGs. We're just we're going to be very open, and the teachers, you can totally redefine your role for that Friday afternoon. I mean, you're not throwing everything out, but what you're just doing, taking a step towards just a different model.
Yeah, it's true. That's something I would always recommend to teachers is, if you feel like you want to do PBL, but you feel like it's going to, shut down your curriculum, then just do it once a week. And it's something that way it teaches students how to do long range planning and, and keep that time, because they have throughout the year or, the semester to get it done. They just do it every Friday. It's something that they're always touching on. It's a great suggestion. And certainly, it's what teachers always want to do, but they never feel like they'll have time to do. So it's a great way to do that, and a great way to learn to coexist in the world that we are now experiencing in this evolution. So wonderful.
Well, Darren, I have taken pages and pages of notes today.
That's from him, Jerry.
Great.
It's great. He's so wonderful. So I really suggest everyone follow Darren on LinkedIn. We'll share all of his information in the show notes. And but you also have some free resources, Darren. Where can people access those?
I'll share that with you, so you've got access on Gumroad. It's darrencoxon.gumroad.com. So it's just it's a repository of all of my various textbooks and course books, and they're all available for free. So you're welcome to use those.
It's incredible.
That's fantastic. Well, keep up the good work and keep leading us in new directions.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks
very much.
You bet.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify, and subscribe to us on YouTube.